Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/spookshow. Then go over to morbidlybeautiful.com as we are now part of the Morbidly Beautiful Podcasting Network.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You'll float too! You'll float too! You'll float too!
Everybody here dies by dawn. Dead by dawn!
Welcome to the Spook Show. Hello and welcome once again to another edition of the All-American Spookshow Podcast. This is episode 200. Technically, it's episode 201 because we did have a bonus episode last October. But in the order of which we actually, number these things, this is episode 200. So we finally come to the big moment. We had wanted to do something a little bigger, like not movie-wise, because I think we got a pretty big movie here. We landed on The Lost Boys from 1987. But we wanted to do like a watch-along or something like that, and it just didn't work out. Our schedules didn't align, so we couldn't get everybody in the same place at the same time, so we decided just to kind of have a regular episode, but have a big movie. So we're going with The Lost Boys from 1987, but you do have us all. Believe it, this is probably the first time in quite some time. You got to go all the way back to October. So before Tiana was, a regular player here, right? I think. But you've got myself, Josh, and you've got Donnie.
Yo.
Will.
Hey.
That's right. He's here. He's got a voice. He's a real boy. We've got the Professor Smoke.
What's up?
And we've got his lovely wife, Tiana.
Hi.
And yeah, it's awesome just to have us all here under the same roof at the same time. Well, not all under the same roof, but as far as the podcast is concerned, all here at the same time. So it's a perfect timing too with this, not only episode 200, but this movie in particular that we were all able to be here. Before we get into it, we'll go ahead and throw out the usual information. We encourage you to go check out awspookshow.com. We call that the center of the Spook Show universe. From there, you can go listen to our past podcast archive, which now is 201 episodes, or at least 200 past episodes from this one. We also, from there, you can go to our YouTube, where every month we have Grindhouse Gutter, Video Vortex, and Hammer Horror in order. Those 3 different series that come out pretty much every week, all month long, every month. So lots of stuff going on over there. And of course, podcast episodes are uploaded there as well. So there's almost never not something new going on over on our YouTube channel. And we also want you to go check out our Patreon and become a patron. Patreon.com/AASpookShow. And you can reach that as well from the website, AASpookshow.com. And if you become a patron, you get video minisodes every month, including the Library of the Professor. And you also get our monthly special Crapsterpiece Theater, where, Donnie, what are we watching this month? I've already blanked.
Let's see. This month we're watching Ghosts Can't Do It.
Oh yeah, that's right. I already put it out of my mind because I nominated it and it won, and I don't have to watch it. So that's the gimmick. Whoever nominates, we don't tell y'all who's nominating what, so we don't sway the vote. But whatever movie we land on, that person that nominated it doesn't have to be there. So I'm the lucky one. Ghosts Can't Do It.
Yeah, it's extra torture for the rest of us. So we always try to nominate the worst, so we don't have to do it.
Yeah. And believe me, we've nominated some shit, and lots of shit has been slung against the wall. So we'll see if this is diarrhea or floater or sinker and all the other criteria, or you guys will. I won't be there, so I guess I'll find out when everybody else does at the end of the month. And I don't expect Will to actually partake in that, right? Like I don't think you're going to watch it, are you?
No.
If I don't necessarily contractually have to, you're right. But that'll come out on Friday, February 23rd. So another big month coming up, and we'll tease what we've got going on because that'll actually come out this Friday. But we'll tease what we've got going on for the rest of the month at the end of the episode and into March. So it'll all be here before you know it. So I'll go ahead and toss to the trailer for The Lost Boys.
Michael and Sam have just moved to Santa Carla, California. They're about to discover its secret.
Notice anything unusual about Santa Carla yet?
No. It's a pretty cool place. If you're a Martian.
Or a vampire.
When you scream.
So where are you? The flying nun?
I'm your brother, Sammy. Help me!
Stay back! Stay back!
What's happening, movie star? Get yourself a good sharp steak. Drive it right through his heart.
You're a vampire, Michael. My own brother, a damn blood-sucking vampire. Oh, you wait till Mom finds out, buddy.
When a vampire buys it, it's never a pretty sight.
Michael, they're coming! Oh, shit!
All right, there you go. That's the trailer for that. So as far as going through our history with it, I'm going to assume that this is something that every one of us has watched. Will, have you seen it before this time?
Lost Boys? Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Donnie, what about you?
Yeah, I've seen it a couple of times.
Tiana?
Oh, I watch it once a year.
Do you have an annual like date? Like, oh, it's February, whatever. If it's time for the Lost Boys. And Smoke, what about you? I'm sure not only have you seen it 1,000 times, but you own it on CED, VHS.
No, believe it or not, this is the first time. No, I'm kidding.
What?
I saw it in the theater, of course, when it first came out. Then I don't know how many times beyond that. But yeah, I had it on. I don't think I have it on this one. I don't currently think I have it on VHS, but back in the day I did.
Oh,
so
wow.
we picked up the 4K recently, and that's how we watched it this time around. We broke open that new 4K to check that out.
How did that look?
It looked good. It looked and sounded good. Now, we don't use the, what I think is known as the soap opera effect, where you put that comb filter on or whatever,
Yeah.
That smoothing. I personally, I can't stand that. But I still think the 4K movies, depending on the transfer, and this was a good transfer, still look a little bit better than your average, Blu-ray.
Well, we'll go ahead and get into some of the background info. This movie premiered, it had its big world premiere in New York City on July 27th, 1987. And it was released wide July 31st, so just a few days later, there in 1987. This was produced by Richard Donner Production and distributed by Warner Brothers. Of course, it's rated R. Well, I guess you could say it's really kind of a fringe. To me, it feels more like a fringe PG-13. Like, yeah, I mean, you can see why it got an R rating, right? But I wouldn't necessarily say, of course, this is rated R.
Yeah. It kind of has its moments, where it's like it's not concentrated gore by any means. And even when there are gore scenes going on, they're not like overly, there's a little bit. For it being a vampire movie, sometimes you expect there to be maybe more blood than there actually is. But yeah, we'll get into that.
It has a total runtime of 1 hour, 37 minutes. On IMDb, it's listed as a comedy and a horror in that order. I guess that's about right. It was filmed in Santa Cruz and Burbank, California, and a couple of scenes were shot in Mobile, Alabama, randomly. From June of for a few weeks throughout June of 1986. It had a budget of $8.5 million, and it went on to a worldwide gross of $32.5 million by one of the estimates that I saw. And when we have it, we usually like to throw it out there. So we've got the top 10 in the box office the weekend that it came out. So this was the weekend, the U.S. domestic box office, the weekend of July 31st through August 2nd of 1987. These weren't top 10, but I think it's kind of appropriate to name off the top 12, just so you can see what it was really playing up against. Number 12, Jaws: The Revenge, was in its third week. So that
what the hell?
Yeah.
I can't believe it lasted 3 days. Go ahead.
Yeah, third week, Jaws: The Revenge. The number 11 was the 11th week of Beverly Hills Cop 2. So that was one of the biggest ones at the time for sure, as far as like total gross. Beverly Hills Cop 2 had been raking. Number 10, Adventures in Babysitting, was in its 5th week. Number 9, Dragnet, was in its 6th week. Number 8, also in its 6th week, Full Metal Jacket. Number 7 was a crappy 4th sequel theme going on here. Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, was in its 2nd week.
That's about as good as that other 4th sequel of Jaws.
I'm surprised it made it 2 weeks. Number 6 was the 1987 re-release of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Remember, Disney did that a lot back in the 80s. Number 5, Smoke, this is one of your favorites, in its second week. Summer School.
Actually, now that's not a joke. Usually when you say that to one of us, you know, when you say Donnie or Smoke or whatever, this is one of your favorites. It's usually absolute shit, right?
Yeah, usually.
In this case, though, that's true. That is one of my favorites.
Exactly. Number 4, Donnie, this is one of your favorites. RoboCop.
It is.
Yeah, see? I'm trying to be nice.
It's accurate.
So, Will, number 3, this is one of your favorites. La Bamba was in its second week.
Oh, come on. Jimmy Fallon, Frankie Fallon, whatever his Fallon's name is.
You don't even know his fucking name.
I think Jimmy Fallon.
You sit on a throne of lies, sir. You don't even know who the fuck the movie's about.
That's awesome.
Number 2, in its opening weekend, The Lost Boys made $5.2 million. And then number 1, over doubling it up in the box office that weekend, The Living Daylights. Wasn't that a Bond movie?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that makes sense. A Bond movie would have beat this out. But yeah, so it was number 2 when it opened up the box. But you can see it's pretty stiff competition. You know, like some classics there, man. RoboCop. I know, you know, kind of I wouldn't necessarily say a classic, but Summer School, you know, is for people that like that kind of stuff, right? And then there's Full Metal Jacket, Beverly Hills Cop 2. I mean, so there were some big ones. And that's not even to mention that Roxanne, The Untouchables, Revenge of the Nerds 2, Nerds in Paradise, The Witches of Eastwick, these were all, and Spaceballs, these were all still playing in your multiplex theaters at the time. So lots to choose from there. But it was the summer season, right? July 31st. Most kids haven't gone back to school yet, so you're right in the middle of the summer movie season there. This was based on, I guess not necessarily based on, but it's from a story that was written by Jan Fisher and James Jeremias. But it was rewritten and reworked because apparently it was originally going to be directed by Richard Donner, he ended up pulling out because he had some other projects, but he is named as an executive producer, and obviously it's the Donner production company that did it. But they made a lot of changes from the original. It was under Richard Donner, it was supposed to be more Goonies-like, and they wanted younger kids in these roles. And it wasn't until Joel Schumacher took over as director, and then he brought in the man that eventually wrote the screenplay, Jeffrey Boam, that they wanted a sexier, older cast, so they kind of bumped everything up. So instead of it being more Goonies-like from the original script, they bumped it up to what you finally got here. So, Donnie, what do you think? That would have been interesting, right, if it was more Goonies?
Oh, man. That's yeah, I do have some, well, I guess, yeah, it's kind of like some background on that. Corey Haim actually auditioned for the role of Mouth, which Corey Feldman got.
Yeah, it is kind of surprising if you think about it, that, like, you know, as big as Corey Feldman and Corey Haim were, and then eventually became together, that Corey Haim was not in the Goonies, right? You know, looking back on it. Because he was definitely a big, you know, they were all the same age bracket, right? And he was pretty big at the time. So
yeah, I think this was their first movie together.
Yeah, I don't know how many times they did films together, but they did a good handful in the years following this, right?
Something else I saw though was the movie that Richard Donner left for was Lethal Weapon.
Yeah,
that was a terrible decision.
Yeah, what the hell's wrong with him? And there are some other Lethal Weapon connections that we'll get to here shortly that I saw.
And Lethal Weapon, that came out in earlier in '87 or later? I forget what that came out earlier.
I'm not sure the timing of it, but I'm pretty sure it was 1987 that Lethal Weapon came out. So
yeah, it was 87, definitely.
Yeah, so I'm sure it's something.
But it wasn't Lost Boys when you were mentioning those movies, so it must have been a different, I guess, different time period as '87.
Speaking of the title, The Lost Boys, you know that it basically refers to the story of Peter Pan and Neverland, right? Where in the story, Peter Pan has his friends or whatever, and they're the Lost Boys, right? Like they never grow up. They go there and they never grow old. That's the whole premise of the story. So that's directly where they lift the name The Lost Boys from.
And I think even Kiefer Sutherland says something in relation to that at some point, right? You'll never grow up, you'll never grow old or something like that.
Yeah.
Direct reference.
Yeah, I think he even says like we tried to make you immortal or something like that. So yeah, but that's a more direct reference for sure. Speaking of Kiefer Sutherland, am I the only one that ever says Keither Sutherland? Am I the only one that gets tongue tied with this dude's name? I always want to say
Oh, you pronounce
Kiefer.
a TH like a TH?
Yeah,
for
I
the
don't know
F?
why it is. I always want to say Keith Sutherland, but it's Kiefer Sutherland. But speaking of him, he broke his wrist doing a wheelie during this movie, and then throughout the movie, I guess later on and in certain scenes of the movie, he's wearing gloves. That's to hide the cast that he got on his hand from breaking his wrist doing the wheelies. They actually tried or attempted to make a sequel to this called The Lost Girls back in the late 80s, early 90s, and it just never came to fruition. It was just a thing that never happened. But they did end up...
You know what? Though? They used that tagline, though, for a movie that's totally unrelated, like some Italian or Spanish, I can't remember, foreign horror movie called Vampires, but with a Y.
Mm-hmm.
And the tagline was, "They're the Lost Girls," or something like that.
So they must have been
now
trying
that
to play
movie
off of it.
is boring. Well, maybe we'll get to that some point. I could probably pull it up on Grindhouse, but it is pretty crazy.
They did
not anything like Lost Boys, though, at all.
They did many, many years later end up making 2 sequels to this movie that I still have never seen to this day, because I remember even seeing it. I was just, I love the Lost Boys, but I don't know about that. Lost Boys, The Tribe in 2008, and then Lost Boys, The Thirst in 2010. Now, apparently, Corey Haim was in the first one, but not the second one, because he passed away right around the same time that they were making that. So he was not in the third one, and they did bring back the Frog Brothers for those movies as well. So you have Corey Feldman and, Lord, I always blank on the other guy's name. We'll get to it in a second, but yeah, they did return for those movies. They're up to this day. There has been talk of a 4th movie and a Frog Brothers TV show that has been discussed, but just, to this point has not happened. Doesn't mean that maybe in the future those things might still happen, but have not happened to this point. There was also at some point released a couple of comic book series, which I've never read. And they actually, most recently, I think in the last year or two, announced plans to make a musical. So, Will, I'm sure you'd be all over that, right?
Oh, of course. Jimmy Fallon and Frank Fallon. And
all them Valens. They'd all be involved for sure. And speaking of music, it's a good time to mention the soundtrack for this, right, Smoke?
Oh, yeah. For which is weird. I mean, you think about the Lost Boys, everybody knows the soundtrack. But it wasn't like it was some massively popular artists that were on there at the time. No. I mean, you had NXS, and they were probably more popular than what the 2 main songs are from this movie that you hear that most people know, which is "Cry Little Sister" by G. Tom Mack, who don't even know who the fuck that was before this, and I still don't know who it is other than he did the "Cry Little Sister" song.
You got me. The funny thing is about that song is that I remember that song a ton from this movie, and it's one of those earwig type of songs. When you hear it, it's stuck in your head. I didn't remember. It's been a while since I watched this movie. I didn't remember how many times it's played throughout the movie. I kind of recall, maybe once or twice you hear it, but no, it's multiple times throughout the movie. They play the hell out of this song, or at least parts of it, right? They kind of edit it up and insert it wherever they can.
Yep. And same way with the other main song from this movie, which is "Lost in the Shadows," right? The one that opens the movie in the credits, and then that plays again a little later on, at least probably 2 other times itself, But for my money, though, the song that I now remember and equate even more so with this is probably because of after this movie and in conventions and everything, you'll see him is Tim Capello's "I Still Believe."
Oh God!
People who don't know the name, you will know the muscle-bound sax guy.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Say that, you automatically know what I'm talking about.
I mean, I don't want to, crap on the guy, but has he done anything other than that? I'm sure he has, right? But that's his thing.
He was a sax. He played saxophone for Tina Turner for 10 years.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, he was in the music video. What was it, baby?
He was for the soundtrack to Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. We need a hero.
We need a hero.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
He was in that music video.
That doesn't shock me at all, and I'm surprised he wasn't in the fucking movie. I mean, because he looks like he's from Thunderdome in this movie.
Yeah, it's true.
And he's still built.
Yeah, he's still you've seen him. Well, you've seen him, right, Josh, at the convention?
I've seen. Yeah, I've seen. Look, and if that's your gimmick, you better stay. You better stay fit. If that's if your one thing is playing a saxophone without a shirt, you better keep your shit tight, right?
Yeah, unless you were Chris Farley, I mean, you might be able to get away with it.
Unless you're built like Meatloaf.
He could have got away with it. Meatloaf was built like a meatloaf. But at least he played into it. It's a good soundtrack though. It's a memorable soundtrack, but it's also kind of odd to me how many like cover songs there are. Like
like Echo and the Bunnymen.
Yeah, doing the Doors. People Are Strange.
Yeah, the Doors.
And then there's Roger Daltrey doing "Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me," which is weird. It's like, why did they not get the Elton John version? I mean, I'm sure it wasn't cheap to get Roger Daltrey to do it. Like, why not just get
Don't Let What Go Down on Me?
Don't Let the Sun Go Down? No. That's a different movie you're talking about. Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me. It's just weird, right? Is it a money thing, or is it just like, well, we need new voices for these same songs? It's just kind of an odd choice, right?
I didn't research this part of it now because I didn't think about it until we're talking about this right now. But my guess is that the Doors version is, I can't even think of a movie I've seen that's had an actual Doors song that's not a cover in it, because I don't know if they just didn't license their stuff, because I know there was a time when Jim Morrison got pissed off because the rest of the band licensed "Light My Fire," I think it was, for a car commercial back when they were back in the late 60s, early 70s.
I could think
and he got super pissed off. So I don't know if they just didn't license their music for movies after that.
I could be wrong, but I can think of one, and it's probably going to piss you off when I say it. Apocalypse Now.
Oh, okay, that's true. Man, that was a huge movie. They probably did pay a pretty penny to get the end on there.
Yeah, I would imagine, but it was perfect, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it's a great soundtrack, very memorable, especially those few songs, and man, they play the shit out of "Cry Little Sister," which isn't a bad thing. I'm just saying, like, I just forgot how many times you hear it.
There's a bunch of other little songs you only hear in little pieces, like in I think maybe when they're in the comic book store, you hear it maybe playing on a radio, and it's on the soundtrack, but you hear it for like 2 seconds in the movie. And then the vampire scene, and one of the vampires gets by stereo,
Yeah.
I can't remember what the song is right now, but that song, whatever the song was playing, is on the soundtrack, but it's only playing for that few seconds when he's, getting death by stereo.
This was nominated for
awesome.
It was nominated for a number of awards, but it did win a few, but no like Oscar, nothing, high level stuff, but it won the 1988 Saturn Award for Best Horror Film. And then it also won the 1988 Young Artist Award for Teenage Favorite Horror Actor, Teenage Favorite Horror, just the movie, and then Drama and Best Young Actor in Horror for Corey Feldman. So that's a long way to get to. Corey Feldman won an award for this. Which is kind of weird of all the people to pull from this movie to give an award to.
Yeah,
Corey Feldman.
Like Sutherland or something, or whatever,
Yeah,
you would think is
Jason Patrick.
You would arguably play the most famous role. You would think.
Yeah,
I mean, I said that's arguable.
It was directed by Joel Schumacher, who also, you may remember, made DC Cab, one of Donnie's favorites.
Oh yeah, it actually is one of my favorites.
I'm trying to be nice today.
Yeah, what's going on? Who are you?
It's weird.
It's weird, I'm not saying,
I'm not
Ernest Goes to Camp, Donnie's favorite,
Donnie's favorite, Ernest Goes to Africa, was also made by Joel Schumacher. No, I don't know. St. Elmo's Fire. He did Flatliners, a really underrated 90s flick, Falling Down. I love that movie.
Oh, yeah.
But he's also probably, in certain circles, known more for doing the last 2 Batman movies, that original run. Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. So, Will, you know all about old bat nipples there, right?
Absolutely. Like, especially when you brought in Frankie Valli.
Yeah. Come on! You really just don't know what you're talking about at all. Unfortunately, Joel Schumacher passed away in June of 2020, so he's no longer with us. The movie was produced by Harvey Bernard. He was a producer of The Mac and The Omen, the first one, the second one, and the fourth one. I don't know where he was during the third one, and also on The Goonies. So clearly there was probably some connection with, Schumacher and Richard Donner and all that. Unfortunately, he also passed away in January of 2014. The screenplay, we mentioned it earlier, was written by Jeffrey Boehm. He wrote The Dead Zone, the Stephen King adaptation from the 80s, not the show, but the movie. And he wrote the screenplays for the first 3 Lethal Weapon movies. So there's your Lethal Weapon connection there. So he wrote this. That means he must have pretty much wrote the screenplay for this and the first Lethal Weapon at the same time, essentially, right?
Yeah.
He also wrote Inner Space, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, a ton of episodes, and I think he got a lot of credit for The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr. You remember that?
Oh yeah,
that show back in the 90s. Unfortunately, he died fairly young. I think he was in his early 50s in January of 2000. The movie stars Jason Patric as Michael. You may recognize him from, he's been in tons and tons of TV and movies, over the last 40 years, but he was in Frankenstein Unbound, Sleepers, one of Will's favorites, Speed 2, Cruise Control.
Oh, yeah. With Sandra Bullock and Frankie Valli.
Yeah. With all the Vallons, they were all there.
All right, so I know that we're kind of going through these folks,
it's a big cast.
Filmographies, but I just think it's funny. It's not funny, but it's just kind of how it's been the last few of these. You remember all these great things? Oh yeah, he's dead. Yeah. It's just like
there's a common theme here that a lot of people that worked on this, there must be some kind of 20-year-old, 20 years past, you're all going to die curse or something, because there's a lot of people that were involved with this that are no longer here. There really are.
Yeah. It's oh yeah, you remember all this? Yeah. Remember these great things? Yeah, they're dead. That
was awesome, wasn't it? They've passed. Speaking of which, unfortunately, Corey Haim as Sam.
True.
Yeah?
I got some timing, huh?
Yeah, he passed.
Oh, God.
Yeah, he died at the age of 38 back in March of 2010, but you may recognize him from Silver Bullet, another Stephen King adaptation of the 80s, License to Drive, Dream a Little Dream. Now, I think both of those were movies that he had done with Corey Feldman, but yeah, he died really young, age 38. I think he had a lot of alcohol and drug abuse issues that kind of caught up to him toward the end. So unfortunately, he's not around. Diane West, she's still around, Donnie. That's the mom in the movie Lucy.
Yeah.
This is rare air too that we have an Oscar winner here. Oscar alert. I should have a button somewhere when Oscar alert when we actually have one, because it doesn't happen often. She's won 2 Oscars throughout her career for Best Supporting Actress, for Hannah and Her Sisters and Bullets Over Broadway. And a lot of our listeners, though, may recognize her best from Edward Scissorhands. And this, of course. Kiefer Sutherland as David. He's best known as the character Jack Bauer from 24. That show ran for a decade or so, right? He was also in Stand By Me, both Young Guns movies. So, he's got a long, long history. He's still active today.
And by the way, while we're on Young Guns, it had Blue Diamond Phillips, who also played
Richie Valens from.
Hilarious.
Yeah, well, you brought it back around. I'll give you credit for that. It's got Barnard Hughes as Grandpa. He was Smoke. You may remember him most from Tron. He was in that.
Oh yeah.
And Doc Hollywood, Donnie. Unfortunately, he passed away. See, you had to point it out. So every time I say it now,
listen,
but he had a long life. He died at the age of 90 in 2006. So he had a good long run. Yeah. And he was in every TV show known to man too. Like when you look through his filmography, it's I think he's one of those ones that was in Love Boat and Gunsmoke. All that shit.
Just curious. How many Crapster Piece episodes would we be up to if we all lived to 90? Smokey'd be 100.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Let's just hope that the Lord takes us to heaven by the time.
I'd be hoping I taking a crap on my own by that time. So
yeah, exactly. On your own. Wait a minute. You have crap assistance?
Well, without a colostomy bag or something.
Okay.
I'm sorry, not to get too into it.
Yeah, how that would happen, I guess. Yeah. We don't need the bitter details for sure. Edward Herman as Max. This is the boyfriend of the mom Lucy, right, throughout the movie. He may be remembered from the Kurt Russell Goldie Hawn classic Overboard. Remember, he's the other guy in that movie. He also had a really long run in Gilmore Girls back in the late 90s, early 2000s. That was a popular show. And then he also played Herman Munster in Here Come the Munsters, which I barely remember.
There's
that was even a thing.
Connection to be made here. In the poster, there's a poster for Monsters Go Home down in the little vampire cave.
Yep. That must have gave him inspiration. Like, you know what? A decade from now, I'm going to play Herman Munster in a shitty made-for-TV movie.
Yeah. Kind of speaking of which, Fred Gwynn, who played Herman Munster, he was also considered for the role of Max.
Oh, that would have been interesting.
Was he ever in anything with Lou Diamond Phillips? I guess that's the question. Probably at some point. Unfortunately, he's also passed away. Alex.
Well, while we're talking about other people that could have been cast, apparently Jim Carrey was up for the role, or they had an idea of Jim Carrey possibly playing David in this, since he had once played a vampire before in Once Bitten.
I feel like this isn't the first time we've talked about a movie. I feel like this isn't the first time we've brought up a movie and like, oh yeah, they tried to get Jim Carrey in this, and then like all like stuff from the late '80s, early '90s, where he must have been like the bridesmaid on like 1,000 roles until finally he hit it big. What was his first big one? I guess Ace Ventura, or I guess.
Yeah, Living Color, the TV series, right? Is one that like was his ticket to to Ace Ventura and other things.
But it seems like he was a guy that like everybody must have seen as talented, but like he never quite got into like a lot of stuff. And then once his star, he went from 0 to 100. Once his star rose.
In 1994, he had 3 movies come out.
Oh yeah, he by
The
then,
Mask,
he's
Dumb and Dumber, and Ace Ventura.
Yeah, all those he's the king at that point. From there on, you're right. Anyways, Alex Winter as Marco. He's done lots of things throughout his career, but you would best know him as Bill in the Bill and Ted movies.
Also, I didn't look this part up either, but we were talking about it while watching it. But was the first Bill and Ted movie before or after Lost Boys?
I'm pretty sure that was after. I mean, without looking it up, that feels like that was early '90s.
Well, no, it was 80s. The first one was the 80s, but it might have been 88 or 89. The second one was 90 or 91 or something like that.
Corey Feldman as Edgar Frog. Big time face from the late 80s, early 90s. He was in The Goonies, Stand By Me, which there's already a couple connections to Stand By Me here. The Burbs, which that's a movie that we need to try to get on one of these shows that we do. Right? I love The Burbs. And the other Frog, Alan Frog, was played by Jameson Newlander. So that's, I couldn't think of his name earlier. That's his name, Jameson Newlander. And he may be recognized from The Blob, the remake from the 80s, not the 50s original, obviously. He wasn't alive. And Bone Tomahawk, which I've heard good things about, but never sit down and watch.
Yeah.
Odd movie.
Yeah,
it's really good.
That's a good one, yeah.
Just kind of jumping in here. So the question was Fred Gwynn ever in anything with Lou Diamond Phillips? He was.
Okay. Well.
They both did a movie, Disorganized Crime, with Ed O'Neill and a few other ones from 1989. I don't remember it.
So coming up on Crapster Piece in the month of March, Disorganized Crime.
That's it.
What is it? Hey, why it's Buttercup. Popcorn, add some butter to hot popcorn. Mix it up, wrap it up, Buttercup is born.
It's delicious.
So nutritious.
It's a taste delight.
It's so munchy. Crisp and crunchy. You'll enjoy each bite. Eat butter-drenched Buttercup. Popcorn at its best.
Served in a king-size cup.
It beats all the rest.
For you, the listeners of the All-American Spookshow Podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. So I hopped on over to audible.com and just typed in The Lost Boys to see what would pop up. And we've got a few things here. We've got The Lost Boys, Decker Lazarus novels, book 11. Good God. So there's at least 10 previous of this series.
Great.
For you to listen to, Donnie. Actually, no, I'm sorry. Further down it says, this is by Faye Kellerman, by the way. It says book 26 of this series. So, boy, have we all missed out for many years, apparently. This one's almost 12 hours long, so that's one, if you want to scratch your itch of the Decker Lazarus novels, you can listen to that over there. We've got Lost Boys by Orson Scott Card. That one is just over 16 hours long. And then we've got The Never King, Vicious Lost Boys, Book 1 by Nikki St. Croix. And that one's a little over 4.5 hours long. So there's, I believe it or not, there's a lot of books about various topics that say Lost Boy or Lost Boys or some variation of such. So I've got 158 results here on Audible. So if any of that floats your boat, hop on over to audibletrial.com/spookshow. Again, that's audibletrial.com/spookshow for your free audio books. And now I'm going to go back over to imdb.com and click on plot summary to see what pops up. I bet you we got at least one long one here, right? Yep, we do. I'll give you the short one first. After moving to a new town, two brothers discover that the area is a haven for vampires. There's a couple of other ones, but we'll just go with the longest one here. This was submitted by J. Remington W. over on IMDb. Financial troubles force a recent divorcee and her teenage sons Mike and Sam to settle down with her father in the California town of Santa Carla. The town is plagued by bikers and some mysterious deaths. At first, Sam laughs off rumors he hears about vampires who inhabit the small town until he makes friends with two other boys who claim to be vampire hunters. But after Mike meets a beautiful girl at the local amusement park, he begins to exhibit the classic signs of vampirism, sleeping days and staying out all night, and is drawn into the gang of bikers by the beautiful girl. The younger boy starts getting into trouble because of his friend's obsession. Fearing for his own safety, Sam recruits the two young vampire hunters to save his brother by finding and destroying the head vampire. Yeah, I guess that's a good enough description.
Yep.
So where do you want to start?
Right. Let's see who's who
next
nominated
time on the All-American Spook Show.
Yeah, it was like
we all gave it a fair rating. Good night, everybody.
Yeah, I guess we kind of because we all threw them up on the wheel. Whose movie was this?
Mine.
Yeah, there you go. Tiana, this is what do you think? I mean, without giving your rating away, and obviously, I think it's fairly known that we all love this movie and appreciate it, and we've all seen it a dozen times. So, where do you think this one ranks of like some of your favorite '80s horror movies?
Oh, it's up there.
and that kind of is a big question. It's a loaded question because there's so many good movies, horror movies from the '80s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a tough one. I mean,
everything just works well together, and it just
You know, one of the things that I saw somewhere about this is that this movie kind of ushered in the modern era of vampire movies, and that like it kind of made it a little younger, a little sexier. It kind of gave vampire movies a different vibe than had been seen a lot before this.
You know, I'll tell you one big influence on this though is and we were talking about MTV off air before we got into this episode. For whatever reason, I don't even remember why it came up, but I think MTV is a big part of this. I mean, it was huge in '87 when it came out, and the editing style, and then the fact that music was so incorporated into the movie, and very, it was very much influenced by MTV's shooting, music video style.
There's no doubt about that. And I think too, like just having that the mostly younger cast, other than like Diane West and Herman Munster or whatever his name was.
Fred Gwynn.
The older, Fred Gwynn wasn't in this, but
yeah.
Other than the older aspects of this cast, it's got a mostly really young cast, right? So like that's going to make everything feel hip, right? Which is obviously what they were going for.
Yep. So what you're telling me is, because this movie came out, we ended up with Twilight.
In a roundabout way, probably.
1 star.
Yeah.
1 star.
Speaking of Twilight, I noticed something, and I never noticed this before, and I don't know if it's because it was 4K, maybe because it was so crystal clear in 4K. Whenever they kill the first zombie, when they kill the first vampire in the cave, I can't remember his name. It was Bill from Bill and Ted.
Yeah, Marco.
When they kill him, and they leave, and they go out in the daylight, they had glitter on their jackets or whatever. Like, I'm like, what the hell is this glitter?
Yeah.
Like in the sunlight, it was glittering, and I'm like, what the? I don't remember ever seeing that before. Like, did somebody throw some kind of damn Twilight reference in this damn thing or something? So I don't know why they had glitter on their jackets, but the blood was glittering in the sunlight. So.
Yeah, Corey Haim actually mentioned something about this in a documentary or something, and he said that they did put glitter in the fake blood to make it shimmer and kind of shine with the lighting. But yeah,
and that makes sense.
That makes me wonder now about
the sparkling vampires in Twilight.
Yeah, if you're able to talk to, if you were able to talk to whoever wrote, was it Stephanie Meyer? Was that her name that wrote the book?
Yes.
If you were able to talk to her, then
she got that idea.
I bet it wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will, I'm with you. 1 star. Oh God, man, I got to think about that movie again. I don't want to do that. This movie is kind of, to me, it's a series of like iconic type of moments, and it really is just so well put together, and it is really like a time capsule too, like especially with that comic book shop.
Oh yeah. They go right from a video store, which is awesome.
Yeah.
With her mom in the video store to the comic book shops. The next scene.
That was one of the notes I made when I was watching. I was like, man, I just want to go to that video store and go to that comic book shop.
Yeah.
I saw
nerds.
Yeah.
Well, I read something saying that comic book shop's still there, and they still have a copy of the comic book of awesome. The vampire comic book.
Like the vampire pamphlet that they hand out to people. I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the guy lets you take pictures with the comic book for free.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like we said, most of this was shot in Santa Cruz, which I guess I thought was kind of weird that we're just going to call it Santa Carla instead of, why not just go with the name Santa Cruz? Maybe they didn't want to give a shitty reputation to Santa Cruz, so they came up with a fake name.
Yeah, that is. Oh, Santa Cruz, the murder capital of the world. Oh yeah.
They didn't want to be associated with not only vampirism, but just all the horrible things that apparently happen in this town. They definitely paint a bad picture of this. Like, man, this is a shitty town, but it's also like, I guess that California, it's like a hippie, like a former hippie town, but mixed with like 80s punkers and shit. It's just a weird scene.
Definitely had the whole 80s, like California surfer, with the whole video store and the comic book thing going on. And like I said, the punks outside when they were playing People Are Strange, the Echo and the Bunnymen cover.
But you were just reminding me of mentioning the comic book shop again. All I could think of when I'm looking at that comic book shop and that video store is how much that shit is worth now. I'm like, God damn, all those tapes. Look at those things, man. Or all these random comics. Like, holy shit, I'll take every one of them. 5 copies of each.
Yep. And I was noticing that there was City Heat, like a clamshell. There's a whole bunch of Warner clamshells, obvious reasons, because Warner produced it. So there's a bunch of Warner clamshells.
Yeah, they had tons of them, just stacked up back there, like a whole shelf of lined up of them. I'm just like, oh man, how valuable is the shit just in the background of this movie? Speaking of shit in the background of this movie, did you notice in his bedroom? There was a poster for reform school girls.
Yeah, that was funny.
And a shameless plug. That was a Grindhouse Gutter number. I don't know which one, but
yeah. Go over to our YouTube and Grindhouse Gutter. One of the early episodes too, like one of the first 3 or 4 that we did.
3 or 4.
Yeah. So this would have been late 2022 when we did that one, I believe, but without having the number in front of me. But yeah, I thought that was, and I don't remember that being that must have been there must have been some connection to that movie for them to put that poster back there.
It had to be somebody, or one of the writers, or something. Because that movie was even pretty obscure. I mean, it was pretty obscure back then. Even nobody was promoting reform school girls everywhere.
So Jason,
I'll see what I can find.
So Jason Patrick is the big brother here, Michael, right, in the movie. Maybe I didn't see exactly who it was, but you notice in Corey Haim's room where he's got the Reform School Girls poster, there's also a poster that looks like a model, like a male model, scantily clad on a door of his closet, and he kind of opens the door and closes it. But I could be, maybe it was a quick shot, but it almost looked like a poster of Jason Patrick. And I could be wrong, but I was like, wait a minute, why would he have a almost sexy poster of his own brother on the door? But it looked
low.
Oh, was it Rob Lowe?
Okay.
Yeah, that was Rob Lowe.
Yeah, they do look kind of similar, so I guess
Yeah.
It's still.
But that begs another question: why does he have a scantily clad?
Why does he have a? Yeah, I guess whatever, right? I mean, to each their own. But I just thought I was that's kind of weird. Right next to the Reform School Girls poster, kind of a weird weird situation. It was in that closet where he kept putting all of his grandpa's like taxidermy shit. It was on that one.
Yeah, the taxidermy beaver and whatever other,
Yeah, it would just randomly appear in his room. What did you think of like throughout the movie when like, so they got around, I'm sure this was budgetary or, just a creative choice, how they got around you never actually really seeing the vampires fly around. They just kind of do a lot of like aerial shots, sped up or reversed or things like that instead of you actually seeing like vampires flying around in the sky.
Except in the conclusion, the final battle. So I don't know, maybe, like you said, it might have been budgetary. It might have been that they were just saving the actual flight stuff for that last scene or whatever, the conclusion.
Yeah, true. I guess, some of that you do see towards the end in that final like assault on the house, right?
Yeah, or at least inside the house when they were battling, inside the house against the scene that I'm thinking about most is the deer heads and other antelope heads on the wall when they're like going, Michael and David are flying back and forth into those, and he finally, this isn't really giving it. We'll get to it, but everybody's probably seen the Lost Boys, but if not, spoiler alert. With the antelope horns. That also another thing about that, what I'll talk about right now is this movie kind of I don't know if it just sort of throws out certain vampire lore. Like the vampire's got to be invited in, right? They invite in.
Yeah.
What's the name? The lead vampire, whatever. She does earlier on, but there's other times when we're talking about the siege on the house by David after they have staked Marco and nighttime falls and they leave the cave and they assault the house. Well, they just come right into the house without being invited.
They just bust in.
Just because. Yes. So they kind of ignore their own lore in certain parts. And then also with David being impaled by antelope horns, they aren't wooden horns. It's not like you got staked through the heart with a wooden stake, which I thought was supposed to be, but
Now I do believe that though was on purpose. I saw something somewhere where apparently that was the reason they ended him that way. And he didn't just like die like the rest did, or, remember how they all died kind of in various ways, right? When they died, they like one blew up and another one melted and all these various ways. Apparently that was to keep him alive enough to where they could put him in the second one.
Oh, okay. So that's why. So they would have brought him back and said, he got staked, but it wasn't with wood. So he's still alive.
Yeah. It was some loophole that I guess, it was loose enough.
Yeah. The only connection between Reform School Girls and the Lost Boys were 3 stunt crew members. That was it.
Probably one of those stunt crew members had a poster and said, I'm going to put this in the scene.
Yeah,
probably.
This will be hilarious. Right next to the half-naked Rob Lowe poster. The bridge scene. I mean, this is probably one of the more iconic scenes from the movie, right?
Awesome.
Where like they're walking across a rail, like a train railway bridge, and then they just all kind of hang off of it, like, not quite like bats, but they're just hanging off and kind of daring each other to hold on as long as they can, and then eventually start, just fall, and they drop one by one. And now, do you think in that moment he actually flew? I'm talking about Michael, that, because he's kind of like the last one. He doesn't want to, he doesn't understand what's going on. He falls, and then all of a sudden it just kind of, there's like this weird kind of dream sequence briefly, and then he just wakes up in his bed. So do you think he actually kind of flew and then wakes up the next morning kind of like drunk?
I think, it shows him when he's floating later, he can't control it yet. So I think he didn't necessarily fly. He just floated down, just kind of let go. And he didn't fall straight down or whatever. He just kind of floated down, even though he couldn't control the flight pattern and, how to fly yet, I guess, or whatever. That's what I assume is that he just kind of, floated down through the fog or whatever until he hit whatever.
I'm thinking of like an old, like Bugs Bunny cartoon or something when they eat something that they like. Oh, that was really good. And then they just kind of jump up in the air and float down like, ooh.
Like what?
Look, you can't see, this is a podcast. There's an audio. You can't see what I'm doing, right? I'm doing the hand gesture like, ooh, float down. Talking about them flying and stuff like that, though, the one, there's a couple making out in the back of a car, and the guy's trying to, he's trying to do his business. He's trying to make out with her. Meanwhile, she's just sitting there reading a sad sack comic and just laughing her ass off. She might be the first human being on the planet that's ever laughed out loud reading a sad sack comic book. But then they get scooped up, like the roof gets ripped off and they get scooped up in the air. But that happens a few times in the movie where people just kind of get scooped up and you never see what what happens to him, right?
Yeah, just like off screen, presumably, kills.
Now, you talked about the vampire lore. I was kind of wondering throughout the movie, like it had been a while since I watched it, so I didn't remember a lot of the little small details of things, like how Michael became a vampire, but I guess he never really truly became a vampire, right? He was kind of half a vampire because he drank blood when they gave him a bottle that he thought was wine. And he drinks it, so that means he drank vampire blood, right? So now he's kind of half there, but you only become, in their version of the movie, you only become fully vampire when you feed, right? When you drink someone else's blood, right?
I don't remember if that's a thing for other vampire movies or books or stories. Maybe it was. I don't. Yeah, but yeah, for this one, I guess it was David's blood that was in the wine bottle, and he drank that, and so then he's partially just like Star and what was his name? Laddie.
Yeah,
Laddie. We're partial
because
never feasted on human blood, I guess, or whatever. So
they were. Oh yeah, that's right.
They're never, I think, if I do have any issues with this movie, it's that they're never quite clear on the lore, like you mentioned a little bit there, but, it's like, it kind of, it seems like it jumps around a little bit, and you really got to kind of stretch to believe some of the lore that they lay out here. And I think the lesson is just, just let it go. Don't hang up on it too much, right?
Yeah.
Because if you do,
I guess they didn't move a whole lot of continuity when it came to the lore.
Yeah. Because even when they bring Max into the house, now they do throw the thing out like he has to be invited in, right? Remember, he comes to the door and they're like, "Oh, doesn't he say something like, well, aren't you going to let me in? Right? Aren't you going to invite me in? Yes, come on in.
You're the man of the house. I'm not coming in until you invite me."
Yeah. So they make it abundantly clear, like, okay, he's been welcomed in. So maybe going back to what you were talking about a minute ago, where when they attack the house and they just kind of bust in, maybe in their version it's like, well, the headmaster has already been invited in here.
Yeah.
So now the veil is lifted. We can all.
Go ahead and say what you think it was.
Now, Max says at the end, when he reveals that, he's the headmaster vampire, they say, how come all the stuff didn't work on you? Like the garlic and stuff? And he said, because you invited me in. So when the other vampires, David and them came in, they just came in without being invited. And that's why
it worked.
The frog busters were able to kill them.
See, that's why we hired you, Tiana. You're smarter than us. You picked up on these not so subtle nuances that we should have picked up on.
Wait a minute, she's being paid?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, you didn't know?
You said hired.
Yeah. So anyways, moving on. How about La Bamba, huh?
Richie Valens.
Yeah, the classic Richie Valens distraction move. Never fails. So then that makes sense. Then when they do the vampire test on Max, when he came in for the first time, right? And the Frog Brothers are sitting at the table, and they put like raw garlic on his food, and it doesn't do anything other than like gross because you just ate a bunch of garlic. And then they throw water on him or spill some holy water on him. Or something. Yeah.
They had holy water. They threw it in his lap or whatever. And he's like, does it burn?
Then that explains why like none of that shit worked on him because he had been invited in, right?
Yeah.
There you go. So you learn things.
He says that too, right? He says something like later on that you never invite a vampire into your house. You could, once you do, I have power over you. Basically, you can make them. And I guess they showed what Michael could do. Not Michael. What David did to Michael with the whole maggots, rice, noodles, worms thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was weird too. Like that was just what was that? Like was that just like?
I think that was showing their power of hallucination that he could make you see what they wanted, whatever they wanted you to see.
Yeah.
I do like that he has to say it like 3 times, like maggots. No, for real, there's maggots.
You're eating maggots.
Yeah.
Rice is just right.
The really probably
noodles. They're worms. No, they're
really
just noodles.
Probably other than like your final fight. The when they're kind of killing the vampires and stuff. Probably the goriest scene in the movie is the beach party massacre, right?
Yeah.
Where they just kind of descend on a beach, like there's a party randomly going on a beach, and they just descend on it and just fucking go to town, right? They just start feeding and the bloodlust.
One where they bite into, was it a bald guy's head that they bite into and it just like sprays blood?
Yeah.
Real fast editing stuff.
So
when I was going through looking up the kills in this, they listed as unnamed surfer Nazi.
Named Nazi?
which is
so apparently there's Nazis in this.
so apparently
Well, I think that's what the beach gathering, I guess, was, because there were skinheads, I guess.
I didn't pay attention.
Oh,
I didn't pay
there was
attention
one
close,
at least.
I didn't pay attention
Yes.
close enough to see like what type of gathering it was and who was attending said gathering. I was just like, well,
maybe they were to that scene before and they cut it down to that.
I just figured it was just a bunch of assholes on the beach, and then they decided to eat them. You know, like I didn't think past it, but it's the gory. I think other than the final fight, it's probably the goriest thing you see in the movie for sure. This one, and coupled with the stuff you see at the end, is probably where the R rating comes from, right? So,
yeah.
And of course, this was an '80s movie, so it couldn't get away without having at least one montage. Although I was surprised that you get the montage, but it's not like a super long one with its own soundtrack and everything. Well, it's got some music, but it's brief, right? When they're getting the house ready, for the attack, they're cutting up by the way, where did they get that bag of garlic from? Christ almighty.
Garlic was it was readily available.
Well, you could just get garlic left and right in the 80s. I forgot about that. It was a thing.
I mean,
it's a 6 foot long bag of garlic. Where the fuck do you buy this at? Was Sam's Club a thing yet?
Well, I mean, you can't just create quicksand. What do you do for?
Apparently, you start rubbing on balloons. I don't know. Well, Will left, so he must have got tired of us making the Richie Valens. But anyways, yeah, like I was just wondering, like as he's got that massive bag of garlic, I'm like, God damn, where'd he get that? Like same the distributor of Outback restaurants, chain restaurants brought in a bag of garlic. They fill up the tub and they go get the holy water, right? They go get that from a church. So that was a pretty funny scene. But you get the montage of them getting the house ready, and then all the vampires finally attack, and then one by one they're taken out in various gruesome ways, right? Like the one kind of gets like tossed into the holy water garlic tub,
yeah,
and then melts, right? So that was a pretty good scene, right?
Yeah, that was cool. He goes through 2 stages, right? He's coming up out of the water, and he's got like the pockmarked skin where it's burning off, and then he goes down again, and it comes up, and he's basically a vampiric skeleton, right?
Yeah. Then you get the one that's, for lack of a better way of putting it, he's exploded to death by death by stereo.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a weird death for a vampire, right? Like you wouldn't think that would really affect them like that, but he hit him with
just to get that one-liner in there.
Well, clearly, yeah. Clearly, it's a very '80s thing to like. Let's do this just so we can get this funny line in there. Death by stereo. That was the one that he hit with the bow and arrow. So was there something with the bow and arrow where it had holy water or garlic or some such?
I mean, maybe it's just because it was a wooden shaft, like getting staked by wood. I mean, technically, I guess that would fall into the, goes through his chest, but then it goes into the stereo, and I guess because of the electricity going through it, and then the Frog Brothers saying that they all die in different various, ways or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It was just happened to be exploding, but it seemed to me more like, it's this wood shaft with a metal thing on it going into an electric stereo, and then he blows up from, I don't know. I still think I'm still going to go with my initial, they just did it to get the death by stereo one-liner in there.
Pretty much.
That's good point.
And you did get a pretty good head explosion scene out of that. So
as gory as they could get in 1987 R-rated movie, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it wasn't like a Tom Savini had explosion or anything.
No, and it's really quick, too. You really have to be like getting into the moment to really see it because it does happen fast. But then Kiefer Sutherland's character, David, he's impaled on this massive collection of horns because they've set it up throughout the entire movie that Grandpa is like, I guess he just taxidermies the shit out of everything. So there's your reason as to why he would have like 100 horns all in one place. So eventually, Michael kind of vampires out, and then they have the big showdown, and then he just impales him on the horns. Although, like we explained earlier, he didn't disappear.
I thought he was just trying to hook up with that old lady, and that was the way they were implying that he was horny.
Yeah, the widow Johnson or whatever the hell her name was.
Yeah, he was always going over there to stuff the Widow Johnson. I mean, to bring the Widow Johnson stuff down.
Yeah, just bring her things. Bring her. But then after that, that's when you get the big twist that Max is the head vampire. Now, I remember when I was, watching this when I'm like 8 or 9 years old, 10 roughly, somewhere in the late 80s. That scared the shit out of me because, I guess you're kind of convinced that like, oh, he's on their side. And then when you're a less clever little kid, you don't pick up on all the obvious
little nuances.
Yeah, you don't pick up on the obvious. But I remember when he turns around and he's got the he goes from what he looks like to the vampire face. Scares the shit out of me, right? It's almost like the vampire in Fright Night or something. And just, what the fuck, man? Just scares the shit out of you. But I thought it was a pretty good twist, right? That because the way they built it was in that moment, like they finally took down David. He's the big bad guy of the whole movie. They took him down. Now everything should be okay. Michael should be normal, right? Because they keep saying that like once they take down the head vampire, then if you're a half vampire, then you just turn back to normal, right? But so they take out David and you're like, well, everything should be normal, right? No, it's not. So that means, oh shit, there's Dracula's hanging around, like Nosferatu's here somewhere, right? And then it turns out to be the dude that owns the video store. Still pretty good though. But he gets taken out by Grandpa, who has these massive wooden stakes on the back of his Jeep, whatever the hell kind of vehicle that was. I don't even know what that was. Some Jeep jalopy looking thing.
Yeah, the weird thing was we were talking about that is remember a little bit earlier, he was carving up these stakes to make fence posts out of them in an earlier scene and putting them in the ground, like as a fence or whatever. But then I don't know if it was like he went through the fence post and then he just busted into his own house and then the fence post stakes.
No, because if you go back and pay attention to it, you remember that brief moment where they tell him that, oh, the widow, whatever her name was, just called and your date's going to be at 7:00. Oh, we're supposed to go on a date tonight, right? Remember that? When he pulls away, if you look at the back of the car, you can see 4 or 5 of those stakes sticking out of the back.
Oh, really?
Like, sharp side out, like they're sticking out of the back of it.
Well, I also noticed this time around that when she has Max over for dinner, that Grandpa keeps like spying on him, and he just keeps like, it looked like something's up.
Yeah.
Well, it's like he notices.
I think what you get in the end is then when you look back on the whole movie from the very end, you see that he knew what was going on some level, because literally, like I think the last line of the movie is Grandpa like going to get some milk or whatever, something to drink out of the fridge, and he turns around and is like, one thing about living in Santa Carla, I never could stomach all the damn vampires. And then, cue the music, right?
And then that was it. And then the lights go down, scene, credits roll.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's a great ending, to a great 80s horror movie. But I think when you look back on it, Grandpa knew more than you thought the whole movie, right?
I mean, he might not have known about the master vampire, this or that or whatever, but he suspected that he may have been a vampire, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah. He's been, and clearly from the line, he's been through this on some level before, right? So, if you were
he'd already prepared those stakes earlier. Whether even the fence post stakes that he was doing, and like I said, the ones I didn't notice, but the ones that were on his Jeep and whatnot. So,
if you were in today's universe of like where every movie has something to do with a big universe of movies or something like that, there would have been a prequel to this, like Grandpa, the early years, the early days of Santa Carla. So there you go. That's The Lost Boys from 1987. So, Tiana, this was your nominee. We spun the wheel and you won it. So we will let you go first. What are your final thoughts and what's your star rating on this one?
Well, this one is definitely a classic and definitely a film that you can throw on whenever. The popcorn flick. Great actors, great choreography, awesome soundtrack.
Yeah. Memorable for
sure. I
sure.
think I know anybody that doesn't like this movie, to be honest. But
well, until Will pointed out that it was connected to Twilight, I don't know. We might have a couple.
Well, Twilight's one of my favorites. So.
Oh, no. That means in some way Twilight might make it onto our airwaves. Damn it.
You put the thought in my brain.
No,
I think I'm gonna have COVID when that. I'm gonna have COVID when that.
I just tripped and fell and found the purest strain of COVID
Oh, you give it a star rating, right? I definitely give this one a 5.
All right, Donnie, what do you say?
So yeah, this movie's awesome. Nostalgic, excellent cast, great movie by itself, and it just so happens to be one of the best horror movies of the 80s. And I think the case could be made for one of the best vampire movies too. Still yet, I want to make sure I'm kind of rating this accurately for the time period and its influence as well, and also for as much as I enjoyed it. So not going to go quite as high as a 5, but I will give it a 4.5. So I think it deserves certainly that.
Will, what do you say?
I'm gonna go with a 4. Very good movie. You just got to take off for the eventual coming of Twilight.
You gotta shave off somewhere, I guess. Professor, what do you say?
Yeah, it's a classic. I mean, and it is one that you can put on and watch, and it's not like you're like, oh well, I've seen this about 20 times before. It's like you still get into it, watch it.
Oh yeah.
It holds your attention all the way through, beginning to end. So I think the editing and the story writing and everything, acting and everything's on point as far as for being peak 80s movie. Although I'll probably say something that is a little maybe surprising. I mean, maybe not surprising at the time if you were watching this in 1987 and you were kind of, it was the peak of MTV, and we'd already talked about the influence of that on this movie. It was a bit, for me, at the first time I saw it, a bit overrated at that point of I'm looking at this extended MTV music video or something, and then another vampire movie that came out that same year that I, at the time I thought was better because it was underrated was Near Dark. I don't know if y'all seen that one.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
That came out the same year, 1987. Similar themes of these younger, hip, sexy style vampires or whatever, and the same type of thing of this group of vampires taking on somebody new in town, and because it comes a love interest to the female vampire who turns him into one. So I mean, you got a lot of similarities there, but one thing that it had that this one didn't, it wasn't influenced by the MTV style of editing music video type stuff. Near Dark wasn't. So I think at that point, me being inundated with that, I think I gave the edge to Near Dark back then. I liked it better than Lost Boys because it wasn't so, like I said, just an extended MTV music video. Over the years, though, I softened on that, and I think the Lost Boys is peak 80s. And as MTV's gone to the wayside or whatever, I don't mind that style. I think I see that as what it was in the 80s. So I've come around to liking it. I didn't hate it by any means back then, but I would have, if you had told me to rate this movie back in 1987 versus now, I probably would have gave it a lower rating than what I'm going to give it now. But only because of what I said, being inundated with MTV style of stuff just being everywhere. But no, now I think I'll go with a 4 and a 4.25 on it. It is hugely influential, and I love it, and I don't ever get tired of watching it when we put it on. So 4.25.
I'm gonna echo your rating with 4.25 because it really is one of the better horror movies of the 80s. And if I was going to sit there and rank a top 10, top 20, I'd have to really look at, pour over the list. It's a loaded kind of question because there's so much good stuff that came out in the 80s, like we said off the top. So I would probably put this in top 10 or 15 of, best stuff from the 80s. It's really truly a time capsule of the time. And I could see your point, Smoke, of maybe at the time you're kind of this, MTV, maybe yuppie feeling kind of bullshit, kind of, I don't know how to phrase it, but I could see
it just had a lot of glitz and glam to it.
Yeah.
For the time.
I could see where you'd be coming from at that time, but now you kind of look back on that time as something, you can kind of appreciate because it was so long ago, and nostalgia factor, all that. So I think that comes into play with all of our ratings in some way, whether we're even thinking about it or not. So 4.25 is fair for me. So I think I'm going to stay there. And plus to compare it to some of the other stuff that we've watched so far in the first 200 episodes from the 80s, I think that's a fair rating for me. So I'll go 4.25. That brings us to a total consensus of 4.4 out of 5 stars. So obviously we highly recommend it. And that pretty much jives with your critical reviews too. Over on IMDb, it gets 7.2 out of 10. So that's roughly, a little lower probably than our percentages, but pretty close. Metascore was a little lower for Metacritic. That's a scale of 100. It's only 63 overall Metacritic. And Rotten Tomatoes, it is certified fresh on the tomato meter. Out of 77 reviews, it has a 77% score, which is pretty good. And the audience score, as you know, you would expect is higher there on Rotten Tomatoes. It's 85%. So I think that pretty much jives with what we've said about it in our overall score of it. So like I said, we highly recommend you go checking this one out if you haven't. And obviously, we should have said out front, we are a spoiler-filled podcast. So if you...
It's a little late now.
At this point, yeah.
Wait a minute.
Son of a bitch. Well, look, we didn't tell you what happened to Anouk, right? So there's still that out there. Donnie, you didn't have to worry about any... any of that from animal abuse. So, but before we completely check out here, we've got
Connections from the crypt.
Oh yeah. All right. So this is episode 200. So if you're just joining us on this, on this episode with Crypt Connections, we connect the current movie episode by any cast or crew connections from past Spook Show episodes. So for the Lost Boys, on the cast side, we've got Kelly Jo Mentor, who is actually she dates back to when we covered Popcorn from 1991. On the crew side, we've got makeup effects artist Greg Canham. That's Canham with an M at the end. He was also he did the makeup effects for The Howling, Cyborg. Ironically, that was a Canon fodder episode. Yeah. And also Tales from the Crypt and All Through the House, which we just covered this past Christmas.
some interesting connections for sure. So
Yeah,
that will next lead us to... Well, what you got for the official number?
I came up with 14. You know, a lot of the scenes in this were kind of happened all together. But we had the security guard towards the beginning, and then Greg and Shelley who got ripped out of the car. Then we had the whole Nazi surf camp thing, and then everybody at all the vampires getting impaled for the most part at the end of the movie. So I came up with 14.
That sounds about right. I mean, there's probably some that you can't necessarily count because you didn't see them necessarily on screen. I'm sure there was a few there, right, that probably happened.
Oh, I'm sure. And I mean, technically you could almost count all the vampires twice because eventually they became undead.
Yeah.
So
depends on your take on vampires, I guess. All right, so that leads
us... I watched a lot of oh God, now I'm blanking on the show.
Yep.
What was the name of that damn show?
About
based in Louisiana, vampires.
Oh, True Blood.
True Blood.
Yeah.
So I call them vampers.
Yeah, you would, or you just refer to them all as Draculas.
Vamps.
There were 4 Draculas. All right, so that naturally leads us to let's talk about the kill reel.
Highlight kill.
I think there's a few good ones here. I'm going to go with the holy water garlic tub vampire getting thrown in and melted. I mean, like I said, there's some good ones, like the death by stereo, or, that guy or whatever. But I think that one, just because you could argue it takes the longest of any of them, right? The other ones are fairly quick. And David,
probably the most sequence of special effects, latex effects, probably appliances too for that scene.
And David, right, getting thrown on the horns, that was pretty good, but it was dramatic, but it wasn't as gory or as over the top, I don't think, as the garlic tub melting vampire, which I don't remember what his the character's name was, but one of the other 2 goon vampires.
We'll call him Richie Valen.
Yeah. Valen's vampire bit it there. All right, so we'll wrap it up with this.
Gore score.
Yeah, we've already talked about it not being an overly gory movie by any means, and that really the R rating only coming into play with the beach massacre, the final showdown, and really that's about it. Well, Marco being stabbed leading up to the final showdown, and that's really about it as far as the gore. Like the beach massacre scene we talked about was probably the goriest overall in the whole movie. Marco getting staked, and there was a little bit of a bloodbath there, leading to the old glittery blood Twilight connection that Will deducted points from, right? And then the showdown, and like you said, the favorite kill being the garlic holy water bathtub meltdown, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you had the stereo head explosion, sort of, but not overly gory. There's like chunks, I guess, but it's not blood spray and all this stuff. So I mean, it's a very low R rating head explosion scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not like Scanners or
it's really quick. You didn't stick with it. It happens and then they move on.
Yes, like I said, really that's just for that one liner and the MTV music connection, death by stereo thing, really. But it was cool. It was still cool nonetheless. It just wasn't very gory head explosion. And then you had David getting impaled on the antelope horns. Again, not gory, really. And then you have the head vampire. I can never remember his name in the movie. The actor, not the actor's name necessarily, but even the character's name.
Max.
Max, yeah. With the stake, but again, not gory. I mean, they were trying not to go that route necessarily. They could have easily made it, bam, the stake goes through them and a big spray of blood comes out the back or whatever. I mean, they weren't going for that for this type of movie.
Yeah, they just kind of he just kind of gets launched into a chimney, right? Like, or in a fireplace.
Yeah. So, I kind of go back and forth with what I was going to, now, usually I'll refer to Chaz Balin's gore score because, of course, gore score being based on his. He did not like this movie at all. He gave it like 1 skull. His ratings went from like half a skull to 4 skulls was the max. But he gave us like 1 skull, and he gave it a 2 on the gore score. I think that just didn't like this movie at all. I'm not going to go that low. It is fairly low because it's not a super gory movie, but I think I'll at least give it a 5. I think, I mean, it's subjective, I guess, but I think at least a 5. I mean, an R-rated movie, the gore score should at least come to 5, or it'd be a PG-13 under. Well, unless you're talking about nudity or cursing or something like those lines.
I'm sure some of that, some of that R rating too was, obviously I think it earns it a little bit with just enough gore to get there, but some of it's probably language too, right?
Yeah, like Corey Haim's, my own brother, a goddamn shit-sucking vampire.
So I'm sure there's enough there to come to the R rating conclusion for sure. Although it's not an overly gory movie, but it has its moments. So, well, that's it for this week. So it was another big milestone here for us for episode 200. But we move onward and upward in massively big ways. So, Donnie, next week it's your choice. We do this rotation where we all get to pick one, and it's your turn. You got to pick an older one. So, what are you bringing for us?
So I actually picked this a while back, and I went ahead and kind of solidified it a while ago. But going way back, like in the way back era. But we're rewinding, I guess, about 90 years. We're gonna go back to 1931, Frankenstein.
So I'm pretty sure, other than when we talked about the movies that came out in 1922, which that wasn't like an official, Nosferatu episode or anything like that. We just talked about those horror movies that came out in 22. Pretty sure this is the oldest movie we've ever done. I don't think there was another one older than 1931 that we've talked about here on the show. So
yeah, I don't think
that's a good pull for sure. One of the classics, literally of, not one of the best horror movies of all time, but one of the biggest, arguably probably a top 100, 150 movie of all time in Frankenstein. And surely on the money that it made and everything. We'll talk a little bit about that next week for sure. But yeah, so there you go. Come back next week for episode 201, Frankenstein from 1931. So for Will, Donnie, Professor Smoke, Tiana, I'm Josh. We are the All-American Spook Show, and we will talk to you next week.